here's Nancy Mace. She is responding to Sarah McBride becoming the first trans woman elected to Congress that we know of, out trans woman. And just to remind you, Nancy Mace was a big fan, or I should say she would reject all of the Republican targeting of trans and gay folk. This is Nancy Mace back in March of 2021. Now, that's a long time ago. That was almost 3 whole years ago. That's back when we had a thing called women's sports. And you could actually see women play sports. Of course, that's all been destroyed now. She said, I strongly support LGBTQ rights and equality. In an interview with the Washington Examiner, no one should be discriminated against. Mace added that she believed, quote, religious liberty, the First Amendment, gay rights, transgender equality can all coexist. Mace added that she had friends and family that identify as LGBTQ. And having been around gay and lesbian and transgender people has informed my opinion over my lifetime. Oh, that's pretty, that's pretty good for a Republican. In June of 2021, she tweeted, we should all, quote, come together to celebrate the challenges our LGBTQ plus has overcome and the bright future ahead. And here she is, living in the future. This was 2 days ago. Yesterday, speaking to the press on Capitol Hill.
Today and last night for fighting to protect women and girls, it's ridiculous. So if that being a feminist makes me an extremist, I'm totally here for it.
Is this effort in response to Congresswoman McBride's coming to Congress?
Yes, and absolutely, and then some. I'm not going to stand for a man, if someone with a penis is in the women's locker room, that's not okay. And I'm a victim of abuse myself. I'm a rape survivor. I have PTSD from the abuse I've suffered at the hands of a man. And I know how vulnerable women and girls are in private spaces. So I'm absolutely 100% going to stand in the way of any man who wants to be in a women's restroom, in our locker rooms, in our changing rooms. I will be there fighting you every step of the way.
How do you think
today?
Can you play the clip of Nancy Mace going off on these reports of Matt Gaetz having sex with an underage girl? Bradley. Well, just pull up the clip of Nancy Mace ripping into Pete Hegseth, who paid off a woman in a civil lawsuit. The story has been recounted by her friend that this woman worked at a conservative convention, was assigned to make sure that Pete Hegseth got into his room. Hegseth was drunk. She walked up there with him. A friend had seen the woman, said she looked fine. And then this woman wakes up 8 hours later, hazy, unclear what happens. She goes back to her room where her husband and her child is and remembers that she was raped by Pete Hegseth. Can you play that clip of Nancy Mace tearing into Pete Hegseth? All right, well, then just play the clip where she gets pissed about RFK's reported sexual, or I should say, inappropriateness with his nanny. What about the one with Donald Trump, who was found civilly liable for rape in a trial? Or Donald Trump, who had been accused by 24 women of sexual assault? The guy who did the grab him by the P word. I mean, surely she just must be so wrapped up and been so prepared for the idea of a trans woman coming to Congress that she hasn't had time to excoriate these people as a victim of sexual assault. Fascinating. Really fascinating. All right, one more call. Call from an 847 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is this me?
Yes, it is you.
Oh, good. Thanks. Good to talk to you, Sam. First time, long time. This is Chris calling from Illinois.
Chris from Illinois. What's on your mind?
And I was calling to, I guess, weigh in on explaining the voters, and mostly a book recommendation that I actually got from this show. Matt brings it up a couple times. It's Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death.
Good book. Mm-hmm.
And I think it explains a lot in terms of not only Trump voters, but kind of the response to Kamala Harris. Like a lot of the slogans I would see in comment sections, like, I'm sick of lesser of two evils voting, or like things like that, or how could you support a genocide denier, or genocide enabler, fits into kind of what Postman writes about as like reducing everything to slogans and kind of imposing a TV narrative structure on more complex issues. So like if a person is used to like TV shows, or even used to voting as it exists in terms of reality shows like Survivors, you're not only voting for who you want to win, but kind of against who you want to lose. Like there are heroes and villains that are very clear, and you vote for the person. So if there's, like two villains, that kind of like short circuits everything. So even if voting for the lesser of two evils or talking about harm reduction, like I guess voting in a general election doesn't translate one-to-one with a like TV narrative. Like it could be possible that voting for a person you don't like turns out like is the better situation in the general election. And I've been struggling in conversations to come up with a way to say that doesn't just sound like patronizing.
Right. Well, I mean, I think, I think the idea is that you have two candidates that could win. Which one do you think is going to bring the better material outcomes? It was from my perspective, it would have been Kamala Harris by a mile. Mm-hmm. That's the way that I measure that. Now, one of the failures of Harris, or just the whole process, was that there were people who believed that Donald Trump would be that person, even though they probably used the similar metrics to me. You know, it's like one thing if you say, well, it's in my interest. I don't necessarily care about expansion of Medicare, let's say, to cover home health care for elderly people. What I care about is that we're a God-fearing nation. Maybe their material, and if that's someone's value system, then it makes sense to me that they would vote for Donald Trump. But if somebody says, I hope, I don't think that he's going to deport the innocent immigrants, whatever that means to them, I think they're deluded. If somebody thinks he's not going to, ban abortion because he says it's for the states, I think there's a delusion there. And for whatever reason, the people were not communicated to properly on those particular metrics. But, one
other thing before I let you go, I've been having flashbacks to 2016. My kids are 8 and 6. My son was born a couple months before Trump was elected the first time. And I'll say that this second time around, I don't feel as bad as I did in 2016. One, I guess there's a sense of okay, we've been here before. It's going to be bad, but we've done it. But two is, in the intervening 8 years, since the pandemic especially, I've gotten a little bit more involved locally. And so the panic of just watching things happening and not being able to do anything about it has been diffused somewhat by going to local city council meetings. The night of Biden's horrible debate performance, a lot of people around me were losing their minds. And while I acknowledged that it was really bad, I had spent that afternoon at a city council meeting kind of advocating for more bike lanes in my city. So for whatever reason, just kind of putting my small bit of influence towards that certainly made me feel better, even if I knew that it was still very, very bad, his performance.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm actually working on a. Yeah, I was just going to say I'm campaigning for my local school board as well. So.
Oh, great. No, I think that's a great idea. And I appreciate the call. And I think joining organizations right now, a great thing to do. The DSA meetings have been overflowing. Nestor Gates just wrote in, joined the DSA, went to a new member meeting last night. I'm super socially anxious, so it was no small feat. Cannot overstate how kind and welcoming everyone was. If people out there are intimidated or shy or whatever, if I can do it, you can do it too. Left is best. Yeah, I think, some people there's not as much of a shock element this time around. And there's also, in some ways,
on either side.
On either side. And I think there's also sort of like a realization, like this is a bigger problem than a lot of people had assumed in terms of what's going on with this country. And with that said, I think people are still, the fighting over the postmortem stuff on some level, I think is like, a coping mechanism, because the really only short-term impact is DNC chair. The rest of it is like, go and start doing the work. And whether that is organizing or, going to meetings or, starting a newsletter in your building, organizing tenants, whatever it is, do that now. There was a clip of Hegseth. Did you see that one going around of Hegseth? Didn't I put that in the where he was talking about Mao and how there was a Christian army of people. Well, maybe they'll play that tomorrow. Folks, that is our phone call portion of the program.
Just one thing on Neil Postman, who wrote Amusing Ourselves to Death. That he actually founded the NYU program that I got my master's degree at. The only thing I'd say about that is, like, I think the TV and then later social media, like, those explanations get a lot of attention. And I think it is important, and they all have their own sort of biases and often reactionary. But I'd also say, like, unionization rates have also declined massively in that time that television messaging has gone up. And I would say that's probably, you could keep television the same, but if you kept union density the same, I think a lot of these problems would be different, because they would have a counter messaging that it keeps people focused on the right thing. But we're a very ununionized labor force now.
And understand, this is it is a problem in like 2 or 3 different ways, because this Hegseth clip actually, really explains it. Maybe we'll talk about it. You guys will talk about it tomorrow. But he talks about getting an underground army of Christian soldiers, all metaphorical, of course, and churches and fundamentalist religion are a great way in which to communicate and organize, particularly, not the least of which, because it's self-selecting for people who are willing to follow. And there is no counterbalance in our society to that. And unions is really the only sort of institutional one that I can think of that could exist at this point anyways. So we'll see. Olson for DX. Working Families Party is a great organization to join as well.
Yep, that's how I voted.
Oh yeah, I was. We should have them on. We gotta sit down and start getting some guests lined up. Crunchy. Forget Joe Rogan. We need a Dale Carnegie of the left. Do people even know who Dale Carnegie is?
That's kind of a throwback.
I mean, I do. Ben from Chicago. Nancy Mace has spent her entire career covering up an abortion in her early 20s. All right, 3 more. WTF Cody, I want a gay squared t-shirt. Straight people, Kyle from Montreal, straight people have co-opted our language and our culture. Leave our sex alone. And the final I am of the day. Can I please get a shofar for our beloved dog Lupin, who was laid to rest this morning? He was a loyal friend and a fearless protector of my wife and daughter. He will be fiercely missed, but will be spared the frustration of a second Trump term. Yes. This goes out to Lupin. Thanks for being such a good dog. Hey folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.